This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Today, discussing question one here in Rhode Island on whether to drop Providence Plantations from the state's name with Representative Anastasia Williams and Advocate Deb Suggs. All right, lots going on here in Rhode Island as we begin our week-long series of daily podcasts ahead of Election Day. Man, are we getting close? And obviously the election already underway for many of you. I know a lot of you have probably already voted or have completed your mail-in ballots, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't change the fact that we're going to still see a large turnout of voters on Election Day proper. Now, we won't have the results, more than likely anyway, until, I don't know, a week after Election Day. We'll find out together how this all plays out. But one thing's for sure is that we still have time to have a conversation about some of the key issues that are on the ballot this year and that are kind of impacted by the ballot this year. So that's what's going to happen this week on BTOWN. We'll have some commentary on the presidential election coming your way. We'll look at some specific nuanced issues that the election's results may impact, everything from COVID-19 to some policies on transit and so on and so forth. We got a lot coming your way. Today, though, focusing in on the only statewide referendum question, and that is question one, whether to drop Providence Plantations from the state's name. Now, folks, we've been on this throughout the year. We've had a number of episodes that have kind of brought in advocates for dropping Providence Plantations from the state's name. You think back to Rep. Marcia Ranglin-Vassell earlier this year. And we've also brought live coverage of some of the decisions that have been made on the municipal and statewide level in formal context to drop Providence Plantations, that being Mayor Lorza and his decision to remove Providence Plantations from all city documents, and then Governor Raimondo shortly thereafter dropping Providence Plantations from all statewide documents and usage. But question one, it deals with whether to once and for all drop Providence Plantations from the state's name. Now, this very same question was on the ballot in 2010, and it failed miserably. Something like over 70% of voters here in Rhode Island voting to not change the name. But you have to think that with the educational component that has gone on this year, with all that we've seen with respect to social justice conversations and movements in the streets and beyond, that the needle may at least have moved somewhat forward, if not significantly forward, on changing the state's name here in this context. And let me tell you, I would be remiss if I didn't come out and say, look, I am certainly in favor of dropping Providence Plantations. And I think you're going to hear some really compelling arguments if you're on the fence in this, if you're someone who wants some talking points to present to your neighbors, perhaps. In this episode, you're going to hear some really good arguments for why we should once and for all drop this portion of our state's name. So that's coming your way. Rep. Williams, no stranger to the BTOWN audience and the Rhode Island political audience at large. And Deb Suggs making her first appearance on the podcast, one of the state's leading historians in this area and someone who's been on the forefront of the grassroots movement of advocacy to drop Providence Plantations from the state's name. All right, lots going on as well here in the city with the Jamal Gonzalez situation here in Providence and the ensuing protests that have taken place. We've been covering those live on the front lines for you on our social media pages, particularly on Facebook. And you can go to btown.stream and find the past videos from the actions that have taken place thus far. We've also brought you live coverage of the news conferences with Providence Police on this matter. And tomorrow here on BTOWN, we're going to provide you with more insight into the investigation into this matter with Attorney General Nerona. So that's coming up on the pod tomorrow. Now, all of this is listener supported, and a great way that you can help support this program is to become a BTOWN insider by heading over to our Patreon account. That's patreon.com/BartholomewTown. You'll see a few different options for how you can contribute to help sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that we've become known for. All right, without further ado, Rep. Williams, Deb Suggs, talking question one, dropping Providence Plantations from the state name, here at the beginning of a week of daily podcasts from BTOWN. We're talking question one. Obviously, the vote is already underway here in Rhode Island. Across the country, we're seeing that people are thousands and thousands of people have already voted. And you would think that for the most part, people have been informed. They've been able to make up their mind. At the same time, there are plenty of people who haven't voted yet that are, and even for those who have, there are plenty of people who are going to communicate with people who haven't voted yet. So let's get right into it. Question one, this is something that has been front and center for so many people not only since 2010 when this originally came up on the ballot, but really anyone who's been asking questions for their entire life, especially as a Rhode Islander. I know for decades, this has been something that has stood out to me as a shocking element of the state, that being the Providence Plantations element of our state name. So we have Rep. Williams today. We have Deb Suggs, who has been involved on the grassroots level. Each of you have in trying to move the needle forward in terms of public perception of why it's so important to vote yes on question 1 to change the name of the state of Rhode Island. So thank you very much, each of you, for coming on here. And let's get right into it. Rep. Williams, what are you hearing right now as you, just in general, are you feeling that the momentum is in favor of overturning the state's existing name at this point in time? And what's your message to folks out there who are for some reason undecided about this?
Hi, Bill. Hi, Deb. Nice to be with you again. It's a two-sided kind of sword at this particular time. What I'm hearing is a lot of misinformed individuals are expressing their way of life opposed to being open-minded. And then I'm hearing, oh my goodness, it is a long time in the making. I'm glad it's finally happening. And that's what we need to do. Last night I was on another podcast, and Charles Roberts from Newport was talking about some of the history of slavery. And while he was conversing and sharing those stories, I was actually feeling the pains and all the stuff that he was saying. So it is a reality, and a lot of people are not seeing it, experiencing it, willing to accept it or believe that it's a real situation. It's almost as whiplash, or, a soldier when he comes home from war and he is dealing with, what's that? Say the words.
Oh, the post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic stress.
Yes. So when that it's almost similar to that, so it's real. But Debbie, I think it would be great for you to express, because 10 years ago, you was in that place, and I think it has so much value that you can express that feeling and that understanding and that position then, and share the feeling and the understanding and your position now. It's a decade span, and the knowledge that you have gained that made you see, brought you to that point to say, that aha moment happened. So that's what I'm hoping for all of those individuals who are comfortable with the history that they have only known, and it's not that anyone is trying to change history. We are adding history. We are working on the real history, the complete, accurate history together. We're in it together. This is about Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Go on, Debbie. Bring it on, girl.
Okay. Same question, Bill?
Same question.
So, like Representative said, 10 years ago, I voted against changing the name. I was like, well, you know what? Name's part of history. Roger Williams didn't mean plantation. Like we think of a plantation, who cares? It doesn't matter. What I did over the last 10 years, or what I've been doing, is teaching myself, learning more about the history of our state. I'm a native Rhode Islander. My family has been in this state for 300 plus years. We sailed over on the Mayflower, we walked over from Mass, and we have been in Rhode Island ever since. And I did not know 10 years ago that Rhode Island had plantations. I certainly knew that we were involved in the triangle trade, the whole thing. I did not know that there, in fact, were plantations in Rhode Island, and people were enslaved, more than just one slave a household, that there were people who had 10, 20, 30, 40 slaves on their large farms, because everybody likes to say plantation is a large farm. Yep, it's a large farm, but it was a large farm worked by enslaved laborers. So the more I studied, the more I learned, the more of an impact I felt from that word plantation. The more I kept saying that word it means plantation, just what it means. And it means the same in Rhode Island as it meant in Virginia and North Carolina, in the West Indies, wherever it is, a plantation is a plantation. So that's sort of where I come from. And then honestly, a friend of mine told me a story that really solidified my commitment to this issue. He talked about being not raised in Rhode Island, not born in Rhode Island, coming from a couple of generations off of slavery, moved to Rhode Island, had a child, and looked at his child's birth certificate, and it said his child was born on a plantation. So I thought to my other side of my family, my father's family's history, and I said to myself, wait a minute, I'm 3 generations off of a plantation. And yet my birth certificate, my college degrees, both my undergraduate and my graduate degree, and my biweekly paychecks all reminded me I was on a plantation. And that's really where my commitment to this effort has morphed from or come from.
Yeah, and certainly.
Sorry.
Oh, pardon me, Rep. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, and then it was like that window of knowledge and all this thing came to life. You started being on the plantation. You started seeing and feeling, experiencing what was actually here. It became alive, right?
Exactly. So what I do now, Bill, I'm probably jumping in too quick, but what I've been doing is really just heavy involvement in researching, and not about the triangle trade. I know that. I mean, I learned that. I went to school in Rhode Island. I'm public school educated straight through. I know that, but really researching plantation life in Rhode Island, what it was like to work on a plantation.
Right. The Narragansett planters in what it was at the time, Narragansett County, and folks are, again, you're just several generations removed. And again, this isn't necessarily to create a call out situation, but much of the wealth that has come from many of the prominent families in Rhode Island was forged by slave labor on plantations. We go back to after the King Philip's War and the enslavement of indigenous people. And this is all in the fabric of our history. So while Roger Williams himself may not have come to Providence and said, all right, we're going to call it Providence Plantations and have a Southern style, if you will, slave-driven plantation system, that connotation almost becomes irrelevant when you consider the fact that those plantations evolved into Southern-style plantations, and that Rhode Island's ties to slavery and complete racial injustice is as prominent and as relevant as the burning of the Gaspee.
Exactly. The funny thing, Bill, with Roger Williams, and Roger Williams was not an abolitionist. He was not, and I've had people argue to me back and forth, Roger Williams didn't approve of slavery, he hated slavery, he's this about slavery, he was not an abolitionist. In fact, he wrote very little about slavery. His only comments about slavery is it should not be a lifetime, that people could be enslaved, but at some point, if things go well, they should be free. And in fact, a fact people don't realize, Roger Williams traded in slaves. He and his son traded in the enslavement of indigenous people. They sent, after King Philip's War, indigenous men to the West Indies onto plantations. And in writing, there was a committee there was a committee that he worked with that worked on sending, and literally in the writings, he said, we are sending these to the West Indies plantation. So Roger was very aware of what a plantation was or could be. So this notion from people saying, hey, you know what, that's not what he meant for plantations. He never thought of a plantation like that. He most certainly did. He did.
It's interesting to hear that story, to hear that history, and it's right in books. It's written. Anyone who is interested can find it, but they're comfortable with what's being presented to them, or what they have lived, or what they have known. So they're limiting themselves because they're comfortable with that. They don't want to go beyond what have make them feel good. At this particular time, giving excuses, as that some of them call it, now they're looking for reparations. It wasn't me. I didn't enslave them. Why should I have to, pay for it? And I don't think it's an understanding or a request financially asking the state to send each African American individual a paycheck. It's about righting the wrongs, equality, justice, education. It's a slew of things that's been wrong for so long, that can easily be fixed. But we have to have the willingness of the powers that be, or the powers that are, to be able to make those positive changes. And, Deb, you're just one of many. Bill's been he's been on it. He's been woke for years, so it's like so many have stepped up and been in the front line for years with the hopes that others in their communities will step up as well and understand, not only listen to the conversation, but hear what is being said during that conversation. There's a big difference, so that the struggle is real. And I am so glad that while I'm sad with regards to George Floyd, I am happy that it happened because it opened up so many doors, windows, skylines, little cracks in the holes for people to have a conversation, an open conversation. And like I said last night, people better get comfortable being uncomfortable because, they're afraid to talk about it because they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to ask it. They are like, oh, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm afraid that if I say it the wrong way, it's going to be taken the wrong way. Say it. Because if it's the wrong way, you're going to be corrected. But it's a genuine conversation that we need to have. And we're genuinely are going to make the correction. It's not going to be what you said. For example, if I may, there was a rally we were at about 3 weeks ago. And one of the individuals, a Caucasian grown man, brought his dog. So there were some elected officials, and the rally was of a lot, if not, I would say predominantly, I'll say 95% African Americans. And he had the dog, and the dog was a little restless, nice, big, beautiful dog. And he wasn't getting vicious or anything. He just kept on wanting to move, go, explore. And the owner kept pulling him back. So a couple of my colleagues and I were standing in the area where the dog and the owner was. And his reaction to his dog reaction was, oh, there's a whole bunch of smells around here. That's why he's acting like that. So when he made that comment, my head turned, and so did one of my other colleagues that heard it as well. And her eyebrows raised, was like, what did he just say? But it was like, smells. The location was very clean. There was nobody cooking or eating. There was no distinct smell. So it was a bunch of African American around. So that statement shook myself and my colleague. But I stepped back and I thought maybe this individual and his dog lives in the country, and the smells out there may be different than the smells that where we were located. I was trying to justify his statement because it definitely could have been just innocent. But on the other hand, I didn't know this man. I didn't know what he was doing there. He wasn't in the protest. I don't know if he was an observer, but when he made the statement, it definitely shook me and it shook one of my colleagues. But I tried, rather than going straight to the jugular, what did you say? How dare you? I tried to justify it. I didn't have a conversation with him, but it definitely was noted by someone else aside from me. So I use that as an example. It would have been, if we weren't all masked up, if we weren't in a gathering and it happened, it would have been an opportunity for a conversation.
Exactly.
And he might have been, oh no, I'm sorry, he's always in the barn, or he would have brought something, or he would have been honest and said, unfortunately, we've never been around Black people, and here we are, and it is what it is. He's kind of riled up. At least it would have been an honest conversation. So people need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and let's have that conversation. Because it's a reality that we are facing. And more allies are coming forward and say, oh, I get it. I get it now. And genuinely mean it. So it's appreciative.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's about having a conversation. And that's really what question one should be for anyone that's out. Because there's always going to be people that, you can't move from their sort of entrenched biases or position of, well, anybody who's trying to do anything for someone else that doesn't impact me doesn't matter to me. There's always going to be those people. But you would assume that most people in Rhode Island are capable of possessing empathy and understanding. And also, when it comes to question one, this is something that benefits everyone to build upon history and create just a better understanding of where we came from, where we are today, and how it all interconnects. Why are we seeing what we're seeing with respect to the actions in the streets, or the conflicts that we see between law enforcement and some individuals, or the educational disparities that we see, the healthcare disparities that have come up constantly through COVID, that, well, way before COVID, but that are being highlighted. And something like question one, that's the easy stuff. The other stuff, that's the hard stuff. Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town. Deb, maybe you can talk about that, what you've found in just these conversations you've been having, because you've been having all of these Zoom meetings and just a broad
Certainly, Bill. One of the things that I'm so surprised about is the anger on the other side. I've been having a lot of conversations, but I haven't been approached from people on the other side, for lack of a better word, with arguments for. I've been approached with arguments about why Black lives is so terrible, or why it's funny, I'm laughing to myself. I had somebody literally say, when I brought up my argument and talked about the history, said to me that my parents raised me wrong. They were like, I want to meet your parents. They did a terrible job at raising you. They never taught you how it is to fail. And I said to him, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the history of slavery in Rhode Island, and you're talking about how my parents raised me. I said, I'm really confused. And that's a weird story, but it's not an unusual story. There was an article recently in one of the Rhode Island papers. I can't think of it. It might have been, I can't think of the one. And people responded on Twitter, and the people against changing the name, their arguments were so vicious and really mean, and had nothing to do with the reason behind changing the name. And what I tell people, how I respond is, why do you want to keep it? I don't understand why you want to keep the name. And so many people say, oh, nobody pays attention. Nobody knows, it's silly to change. Well, if you're not paying attention and you don't know the official state name, what do you care if it changes? Right. If it means something to one person, if it's hurtful to one person and you don't care, then why do you care if it changes? And I've had so many people say, oh, it makes a good trivial question. It hurts people.
Right.
So hurting somebody should trump a trivia question in my viewpoint. I do try to argue when I argue with people with history. And people that know me know I'm a big thing, argue with facts, not with emotion. I don't argue with emotion. I argue with a fact. And what I get in return is typically And as of late, from people, how horrible Black Lives Matters is and the terrible things about the riots and things like that. And I said, well, all I'm saying is to change the state's name. Like, to change the state's name, it's so small. It's such a small thing to do, but yet such an important thing to do. It's not, a revolution, not calling for a revolution. I'm calling to remove one word from the state's name, 2 words really, because I don't know that it needs to be Rhode Island and Providence either. No other state says the state name in the capital, but It's so small. It's so small. And I just, I'm sorry, Anastasia, go ahead.
It's not changing history. And they're sticking on, that's our history. We don't need to change our history. And it's like, nobody's changing the history.
Exactly. And I say that all the time. You don't have to change when it talks to monuments, when it talks to changing the state's name. It doesn't change history. It takes away the celebration of the things in history that we shouldn't be celebrating.
Yes.
It doesn't change Rhode Island. Roger came over, William Blackstone came over. They came here. Whatever happened, it changes a name. It changes a symbol. And that's another thing I remind Bill. Words are symbols, and the symbol of plantation, I don't care what you're saying. People say, well, I don't think of this or that when I think of plantation. Yeah, you do. You're not now in the argument, you don't, but you didn't think of a plantation when I say the word plantation. You don't see a big farm.
Yeah, absolutely you don't.
I just know you don't see a big farm. It's funny, we asked people 6 words of what you think of when you hear the word plantation. And I will be honest with you, I can show people the list if they want. Nobody said a big farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I believe it.
Nobody said it. So that's how.
Debbie, if the N word, right? Mm-hmm. Who changed the N word from the N word to Negroes? Because everybody's comfortable with hearing Negroes, but they're not with the first one, right? So I'm not going to say it, even though I have no problem saying it. Negro to colored to Black to African American. The African American or the slaves didn't advocate for those changes, because that first word was not appreciated, or didn't sound good, or didn't feel good for someone to decide, no, we cannot call them that anymore. So we are going to go and we'll call them Negroes instead. And then from Negroes, it's not appropriate. Let's call them colored. So somebody other than those Negroes or colored or African Americans or Blacks, whatever they, the different sequence of events, somebody felt something, some type of compassion, I would think, to say, we can't demoralize these people by putting these labels. I know that the intent was to keep, slaves down and out by, these labels, but each one got better along the way, per se. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Well, I do agree. It's funny because using an example of words having meanings, the N word initially, 300, 400, whatever years ago, had nothing to do with race or color. The N word initially was about someone who was cheap or a liar or something like an unsavory person. And then the continental folks or people or white folks in Europe started applying that to people of color, that there was something unsavory about people of color. I should hope there are people I know that use it, but no one is saying, well, the original meaning of that word meant that somebody was unsavory, so I'm going to call everybody that, because words don't, meanings don't change. A word is a word. It's the same idea with throwing a swastika out there. There are people that say, plantations is not a symbol. It doesn't mean anything. Well, if you feel that way, then you don't mind if I put a big swastika at the back sticker on my car. Because really a swastika in Sanskrit is a sign of peace. Mm. Words change and things change and meanings change. The word slave. The word slave actually has nothing to do. The word slave was a term for Slavic people. Mm. Slavic people are blonde, blue-eyed people from Northern Europe. That's where the word slave comes from. Nobody thinks of a Slavic person now when they hear the word slave. Nobody.
Yes.
And I challenge anybody who says they do. And it's the same thing when you say the N word. You don't think of, you have a particular color in mind when you say the people. Words change. And the word plantation, 300 years, I don't care what Roger meant 300 years ago, it doesn't mean the same now.
That's it.
It's changed.
Yes.
And it should not be used as a celebratory word.
Right.
Absolutely.
I agree. Yes, sister. You're talking, baby. Yes.
This is good stuff here.
It is.
Last couple of minutes here. And once again, appreciate both of you very much coming on. And let's keep this conversation going. I have not, in general, come out and made any endorsements or anything like that. But I can unequivocally say I endorse question one. Anyone out there who has any reason that they are voting no on question one, I'd encourage you to email me, or I'm assuming email each of you as well. If you have sincere questions, not hate mail, but I can't possibly understand why anybody would vote no on this. I haven't talked of all the people I know that have early voted. I haven't heard from one person who has voted no on this, but in these last few minutes, your kind of elevator pitch to, let's say there's someone who is genuinely ignorant on the issue or undecided, not somebody who is entrenched in bigotry or, just unwilling to move. Well, I guess we'll start with Rep. Williams. What's your elevator pitch to somebody on question one?
Let's have some real talk. If you're a person of integrity, let's have some real talk. Just so that you hear what I'm saying, not just listen to what I'm saying, but you hear what I'm saying. Let's have some real talk. Man to woman, woman to man, all of us together, whatever, however, I'm open and I'm willing to share my story, my experience, my family's, my ancestors. I'm willing to bring you there. I'm willing to do that so that you can see. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm trying to share what I have experienced, the real part of our side of history, which is all of our history. That's it. Come on, welcome.
Exactly.
Deb, same question.
For me, Bill, I'm really looking to address the people in the middle. There are those of us who support it, and there are people that you're never going to touch. They're going to not support it regardless of what I say. So I ask the people in the middle, and I say this often to people, if it doesn't matter to you, it's such a small step to addressing 300 plus years of oppression. Mm-hmm. If it's not personal to you, it's personal to your neighbors. Why not approve it? And that really is my pitch to people in the middle. If it hurts your neighbors, and it doesn't, you're not playing, you're not waving the flag and singing songs about Providence Plantations, then why not vote yes? And that's really my push. That's my push for it. And as Rep said, and as you know, I am always happy to talk and always happy to present the things that I'm learning. So anybody wants to talk about history, that's my subject. That's my favorite thing to talk about, regardless of what it is. So happy to do that. But more importantly, for my elevator pitch, it's just such a small step to address 300 plus years of hurt and oppression.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
Rep. Williams, Deb Suggs, thanks so much. This has been awesome. Just kind of sitting back for the most part and letting this conversation flow has been incredible. And thanks for all each of you do. And for the listeners out there, let's go. Come on. Let's go. Make this the inverse of what it was in 2010. Let's see 79% voting in favor of this. And don't be a coward. Have the real talk, as Rep. Williams said. Have the real conversations. It's a small step forward. Stop buying into these false narratives that you've been fed or you're feeding yourself, and vote yes on one. There's nothing else on this ballot. Well, there are things on this ballot, but there are few things on this ballot locally that can that can prompt a more broad dialogue in an appropriate manner and in an appropriate forum than this question. So let's see it.
It's
Thank
Rhode
you, Bill.
Island.
Period.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Stay up to the minute on what's going on in Rhode Island and beyond by following me on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Bill Bartholomew.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.